Okay. Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. I was wondering about what is preventing or slowing down advancement on this rock in the middle of nowhere. I thought about human behavior and how we are in a certain psychological position. People usually, their life is a story they tell themselves, and their success or their lack of success seems to be in this current society how much this story has a connection to reality. Now we can say reality is a physical story, imagination is a non-physical story, because in both cases we consider there is someone who has reality, there is someone who has imagination. So we are objective subjects or subjective objects that have a relationship with two films, really. When it comes to the outer realms, I've termed the universe of objects as the outer realms. That means in front of the eyes we see objects. Now fear, if we were to wonder about what is fear for an object, it would be its discontinuity. But if we were to wonder what is the fear of a subject, it is not discontinuity. The fear of a subject is its expansion. I shouldn't say expansion, I should say a subject doesn't fear vanishing because it can immediately arise. The thing about a subject is its effort and its usage. So what that means is if I'm sitting here and I suddenly envision it very detailed in my inner realms, a soccer player doing a backflip, doing a bicycle kick, and doing that bicycle kick in my inner realms, I could visualize it, and I could even visualize the bicycle kick hits the ball and the ball hits the crossbar and just shoots into the sky, you know, the front crossbar, and it shoots to the sky, you know, and the bicycle kick doesn't go in, but it shoots in the sky, and like a boomerang, imagine it goes back in the goal, even though highly improbable, but now that I'm not doing the bicycle kick in front of me, I'm in a room right now, but in my inner realms I saw the bicycle kick. Now if I was to ask myself what was the value of that inner realm event, it is only in its externalization and engagement. The body is designed to in some sense to be moved ultimately. The mind is not engaged to move. The mind is there to be used. Not used as movement, to be used as being. I don't know how to say it. So there is fear for an object, and there's fear for a subject. The fear for the subject is activation before dismissal. The fear of the object is just generally dismissal. It doesn't matter if it activates or not. That means a person will feel upset if anything happens to their body, whether they were doing something with an intent or with no intent, with an aim or no aim. You know, that's a cool idea, you know. People seem to not notice that they can aim. Not their life, not the story of their life, but they can aim their intelligence. And sometimes I wonder, what would a civilization that had no fear of any sort look like? What would a fearless civilization look like? And I saw that when I was young. I was very young. It was like the anime Dragon Ball Z had come out, and I remember as a kid watching and hearing this idea of a warrior species, a warrior class of people, a warrior civilization. Right now, we are not a warrior civilization. If we were, everybody should have taken a Spartan parental techniques. And I would say we are not warriors, we are a communicating species. We are a designer species. That means we have found something better than meaningless physical activity to do on this planet, and that's communication. War is technically communication, it's just inefficient communication. If there was no fear, we would understand rather than fight or flight. If there was no fear, there would still need to be morality. That means if people didn't fear laws, there could be the idea that there would be a lot of chaos. So outer realm fear, to get rid of it is impossible. I mean, just because we're a temporary biological creature, when it comes to the outer realms, there will be fear. There will be fear of, oh my God, what's going to happen the next moment, the next moment, the next moment. That fear remains. But the fear of the inner realms, I would say, is to not figuring out what you were before you die. This is the most important thing. This is the ultimate homework for a universal creature. You are not in a language, you're not in a container of words. It's not enough that we say it's a universe. Yeah, we're in it. Yeah, nice, we found the universe. No. We have to experientially activate and therefore realize not the meaning of life per our effect, but per our causal position and states of intelligence. That means when I look at, if I was to fathom my life from the beginning of my life till now, every moment I have woken up in the conscious waking state, there has been probabilities in my inner realms, and I have been making decisions. I have been choosing probabilities of my own selfhood before animating as a self in the outer realms. So, in some sense, believe it or not, fear is a choice. In the inner realms, at least. In the outer realms, you can't, like, I mean, I have been scared before in the outer realms. And the scare is not just because the person can't handle the moment, or the person can't control the moment, or the person is overwhelmed by the moment. It's just that the person is unfamiliar. Anytime I am unfamiliar, like imagine you were teleported in a planet you never knew existed, right? And then there would be a fear, because all the knowledge, all the memories that are, let's say somebody walks through a portal and they find themselves in another world. Would you fear that world? The answer is most likely because you don't understand that world. And here's the cool thing. Fear is dispelled by understanding. I feared speech when I was young. I understood it. I don't fear it anymore. I feared I feared my intelligence. But now I have a certain understanding of how it works. And everything I have understood, it's impossible to be afraid of. That means the person's like, oh my God, is that a ghost? And then suddenly the person sees, no, it's someone who the curtains accidentally fell over them, you know? Once we understand it's a curtain, and the curtain is pulled from over the face of that ghost, the concept of a ghost is not a ghost. That means anybody who understands energy, you shouldn't fear energy, you should try to see how it's moving. How it's moving behind your eyes and in front of your eyes. That's ultimate understanding. I mean, like, what is wisdom? It is recognizing the beginning, middle, and ending of a system, and then recognizing also its known and unknown variables, and also recognizing where the system becomes empty and desire stops, and where the system is full and desire is still possible. You know, there is so many people on the planet right now that I personally find they misinterpret yoga. And they feel that the renunciation the yogis were speaking about is an outer realm renunciation. So human beings are actually, instead of activating their human life, they are deactivating their human life to experience a non-dualism because it seems more divine and peaceful that way. I would say the most divine activity on this planet is responsibility. I haven't seen anything more divine. That means even for me, when it comes to, let's say, the Abrahamic lens, the religious texts are not divine. What their message is. That means language is man-made, but how language was positioned on a piece of paper, like certain circles of certain religious communities are considering to be revelation, right? That means because language was made by human beings, so even revelatory texts should be treated as the words in let's say revelatory texts should be treated as paint, but how the paint is on the canvas should be treated as the mystery. I mean, I'd grant that to the theological community, but aside from that, it doesn't make sense. Because language is man-made, but revelation is beyond man. So what does that mean? We're using a man-made system to understand something that isn't man-made, you know? So there's a sort of flaw to the law of man's mind, whether it's self-declaration or world declaration. There's some things that I don't need to even think about. They're just present in the world. That's the whole point of reality. Reality is imagination. You don't have to imagine. Anybody who sees reality, you are having access to free imagination. It's as if, honestly, being alive in this world is like living in the imagination of higher dimensions. And then the person's like, wait a minute, so I'm in the imagination of the gods right now on Earth? And imagine, like, I don't know, let's say there's a mystic who's like, oh, look at the kids and their excitement. And this mystic says, yeah, we are living in the imagination of the gods. And then the person says, does that mean I can do anything I want? And the answer is, theoretically, if the universe wants you to do it, you can do everything you want. That means I am surfing the waves of my karma when I give these talks. I'm not joking. I can feel what is karmically authorized to my attention and what it isn't. And there was a moment, I remember, I think it was in 2015, I was on this very, to me personally, it's a divine spot on a rock in the middle of this river, and I was recording a talk. So imagine how much, like, if people saw me then, if people in Silicon Valley saw me, they'd be like, this guy's a maverick. Because I had the phone, I was sitting on this rock, literally, if my grip of my hand loosened, my phone would have fallen into this river, this stream, where I was sitting on the rock in the middle of the river. And I remember the phone is in my hand, I am speaking, and I've like kind of clenched the phone in a way where it's as if I've locked my hand. I've literally as if like made my thumb connecting to my index, and because when you hold it, you want to hold a phone that you don't want to fall, your pinky finger should be on the bottom. But anyways, I was holding this phone and I was giving this talk, and there came a moment where there wasn't authorization. I literally felt I was talking about something that it wasn't for my karma to speak about. It wasn't, as you know, the ancients would say, written in the stars for my voice to point to. And I remember I had to pause. In my inner realms, there was just, it wasn't language. It wasn't like the logos doesn't speak to me, you know. It's through instantaneous presence that I know my realm. That means it's too slow. Language is a slow system. Imagery, physical reality is slower than language. So language is faster than physical reality, believe it or not. Can be faster than physical reality, or it can lock down physical reality. So that existential allowance is so important when it comes to life. And I would like to say, sure, let's all pre-assume we're all equal, but we are not clones. So we're not here to build a civilization of clones, but we are trying to build a civilization that if clones existed, it would be okay for them too. I don't want to be rude, but for me, for example, the context of the world for many people is cloned. Very few people on this planet, I find, treat the whole world as if we're on a galactic island stranded, and everything we know is still on this stranded island. We're on this island we're stranded in. So what I mean is that the true scholars among the human species are those who doubted from the beginning just to reinvent the wheel in case the wheel has turned into a hologram nowadays. For a long time I have wondered in all the moments of my life where I have been afraid, and I haven't been a fearless person from my beginning. I have a twin brother. I would say he has been way more fearless than me. But because there was a feeling in me that the outer realms didn't relate to me. So imagine somebody trying to fit into their world, and I remember saying it in another talk, it was a karmic quarantine. So imagine trying to fit into the world, and then there's like a force field. Everything you try to do in a certain archetypal position through a sort of egoic lens, it fails. And not fails, it doesn't fail, it doesn't satisfy. You see, there's something about like, let's say a person, you see this in like evil people psychology, right? When the person's failing, right, they're like, I'm gonna take down everyone with me if I'm gonna fail, and people are not gonna help me. Well, screw people, everybody fell with me, you know. So there's that sort of mentality, but that mentality is so self-centered that it is extreme from the beginning. I remember once, this was when I was young, I was doing something and somebody was talking to me, and I remember I said to them to stop talking in such a dishonorable way. You know, I was in a way where it was as if, imagine you're doing something and somebody is being a distraction to what you're doing, but you are prioritizing what you're doing so much more important than them, that it's as if you have no regard how intensely your words enter their ear. And I remember I had this, it was a sort of tone in my voice where I was like, just a sec. Like, it was something like where I was like, anyways, it was, I didn't feel good after the way I spoke. But it was a teaching moment. I can't tell you, I have learned more from myself than I have learned from the eyes of any human being. Because my eyes have always been with me. The eyes of others comes and goes. The Buddha was so wise, he understood such a vast universal truth that we enter this realm alone and we exit it alone. And if the person doesn't have a contentment to be alone in the unknown, how do you expect to find the ultimate? That means there is a treasure that is not physical, and the mystics kept this treasure alive through oral transmission throughout the years. You know, and now we have reached a point where, strangely, that tradition of oral transmission is arising again. That means before books were passing on things, it was voices. Our voices, human beings, suddenly realize, oh my God, this story has value. And the human being traveled on horseback to another village, let's say with his last, with it, like, you know, in his last moments in this life, just to share the story so the story doesn't die. Why? Because it is important for us to know as a species what is going on. And fear is the biggest challenge. If there was a monster, literally there was a scene in Lord of the Rings 2 where Theoden King and the armies of Rohan have gone to go save that, you know, what was it called? Gondor, like that kingdom connected to the mountain. And it was for the first time a different dimension of humanity protecting another dimension of humanity, right? And the king, Theoden King, was such a great king because, and thanks to the help of Gandalf in the story, because he did not want to help the human kingdom that did not help him at the time of trouble, right? But Gandalf convinces him that you have to go help Gondor because then you will be next or something, you know? So human beings are important to human beings regardless of our ideological classifications if there was interference from another species. Let's say right now, like, I don't know, there was this incredible short film somebody made where bears became conscious like apes, right? And a bear was holding a torch and this human being was looking at this bear like, no way, this bear's getting to our level. I don't know who made that short film, but somebody go find that genius. And in that short film, the bear becomes conscious. Now imagine if all the bears united, or even Planet of the Apes, you know, the whole, totally forgot about that. Let's say the Planet of the Apes narrative. We don't know how much all of us love the human species. We haven't realized it because it hasn't been taken away from us. We haven't remembered moments where the species has been interfered with beyond itself. Right now we have been experiencing, I would say, a sort of long period of at least terrestrial peace. There is no extraterrestrial interference. Maybe there are, of course, theorists, social theorists who feel there is more than human beings walking this earth. But my point is, that if we would unite, and now all we need to do is imagine an alien species invading us and we will unite. You know? And there is such value in human life. It's ridiculous. It's like, once you find that inner treasure, the ultimate state, you will realize that ultimate state lacks nothing. Because it lacks nothing, the purpose of life only becomes giving. An eternal being can only give, or in quotations, create. But the temporary, they want to manage what will be taken away. Because eternity has nothing to lose conceptually, the way we define it, at least as the absence of the temporary. Our whole value systems in life are based because we're temporary. That means if we were immortal beings, do you know how love stories will change completely? Can you imagine immortal lovers? Immortal lovers would get tired of each other. You know, that means love for immortals may not exist, but only for the temporary. It is the most special thing we have, you know, because it is where our humanity activates. It's given enough freedom for it to be innovative. That means think of someone, their mindset, they wake up to the world, they're like, I love this place, you know, and they go everywhere and they're like, oh my God, you know, everybody, everywhere it's loving, you know, even though they go into a moment where there's people who are hating them, the person's like, oh my God, these people don't realize, you know, everything is love yet, you know, you know, a sort of bulldozing love everywhere, you know. And the person can have hate. I have like, this is the thing where I would say stress and depression for a philosopher is way more intense. Why? Because the philosopher can judge himself from beyond humanized context. That means there was a time, this hasn't happened for a while. It's like last time it happened, I was in Italy. This was the last time I really had experienced a sort of a depression and anguish. It was much more deeper than a depression. It was like an anguish where I was, okay, I'll share this story. So I was in this place, I don't know if it was, the town was called Chislago. I think it was Chislago. I was in Chislago, Italy, and there was a hotel. And this hotel had 3 floors, and I remember I had gotten there at night, and they had, the only room they had was like at the end of this long hallway. And I was alone in Italy. I was traveling there. And so when I go there into the hotel, everything's been booked online, and so I go into the room, and when I go to this room at the end of this long hallway, it's like and the next day I go change my room to a closer room, because I was like, you know, what is this, a workout? But I'll tell you, it was on the 3rd floor, and I remember at night going there, and there was no smoking allowed, but when I go into the room, the light was like, the lights were off, and sometimes when I'm tired I just don't bother turning on lights. And so I remember they had this giant window, this like square window, and somehow the architect of the building had made it that right outside of the window, like, it seemed like the architect was a smoker. And so outside of the window there was there was literally a half a meter space, but solid space, right? Where you could see the tiles and excuse me, not tiles, the columns underneath. There was this solid space, and there were flower, like gardening, what do you call it, flower pots there, right? Right between the window of my room and the flower pots, there was enough of a sitting space. And I don't know why the architecture of this place was so so I go outside, it's like, I don't know, I think it was like 2 a.m. or something. I go outside, everything is dark. I could see all the other windows of the rooms beside, they were all dark. So I was sitting in this pitch black darkness, smoking a cigarette, and I was in anguish. This was where, imagine like something, it's like something is pulling you into a state of its own decision, right? And anguish is like universal nullification of effort. And so when I was so I go into this anguish, and I remember my state of mind was destroying itself. It was as if I was hating on myself and my inner ones. And what happens is, I remember I felt so hopeless. I felt everything I had done in this life was meaningless. not meaningless. It wasn't what I felt I had missed out on a certain way to live life that I could not attain anymore. There was that sort of mentality. And I remember as I was smoking the cigarette, I had this strange thought, and this is not a pleasant thought, but I had the thought of like literally my feet, my corners of my feet, my toes were inches away from the edge of the building, but it was 3 floors, right? And I remember I had this thought of like, it wasn't a pleasant thought of like just ending the moment. And then I was like, wait, first of all, like 3 floors, that's not enough. And the second thing was, at the same time I was thinking like, what if it continues and the problem I'm experiencing had nothing to do with my biological existence, it had to do with my inner realm. Like how some people say, like the person is tired, they go on vacation, like they have a problem, they get out of the place where the problem is, but then in the new place they've gone, the problem finds them. So the problem is actually not from the outer realms, it's from the inner realms of the person. So it occurred to me that if my problem is from my inner realms, it doesn't matter if there's a body or not, if the mind it transcends body, right? So it was even where the idea of like exiting the realm it was like meaningless too, right? So I was there in this kind of unknown, and I was hating on myself in my inner realms. I was literally like, the way I was speaking, that means it's like, the language of my mind aimed at my past senses of self became more and more cruel, and I was using my own memories as a punching bag until a miracle happened. So imagine me in this pitch black outside of this like window, 3rd floor of a hotel, smoking this cigarette, and suddenly my mind is going like, I was like, fuck you, like I was cursing at myself. I was literally breaking myself. And then this is the weird thing, this is the miracle that happened. A stream of thought, like I was like, yeah, you're nothing, but then it was like it repeated. A way I was degrading myself, my own self in my inner realms, looped. Then I realized it's a loop. Then I realized depression has nothing to do with my beliefs. It's a loop. It's like it's something where I don't know if the body gets tired, it locks itself into a mentality or what happens, right? But it was a loop. For the first time I noticed a psychological loop. I noticed the inner event was repeating, was cyclical. It wasn't, as they say, I can't even pronounce it, aperiodical determinism compared to periodical determinism. I noticed that determinism in my moment to destroy myself in my inner realms was periodical. I noticed its loop. I saw the moon orbit around the earth, and I realized that idea is not the earth. That idea was not me. And I remember in an instant I started in my inner realms laughing at how silly I have been, slapping my own memories across the face for no reason, So there was a recognition that beyond a sort of loop, there was freedom. I realized I was looping in my own agony, in my own misery. And so this is where I'm saying misery is a jacket that you should take off the moment you notice you have it on. Because really, if we wanted to be purely logical and rational, our rationality would tell us the world is more unknown than known. We are more unknown than known, so our knowledge cannot have the ultimate hammer blow. There was fear in me. I feared my own future. And it's not that I don't fear it, but now fear doesn't make sense. For now fear is like the concept doesn't make sense anymore. Now it's like unknown. The courage to acknowledge the unknown as unknown. What greater metaphysics do you need? What greater realization on this living you in this living manifestation of a simulated reality, do you need to know that you are the pilot? You are the soul in the room of the inanimate. You are the animate in the inanimate. And so fear actually makes the person buy language. Fear is a sales tactic. And that's why it can manipulate. It convinces insincerely. And think of a battlefield. Think of, like a group of generals against another group of generals. Which general team wins? The generals that have realized each other's strength and they are quickest to implement strategy, because the one who gets into the room first, the room of the battlefield, has more preparation, occupies more space. It's like when a bunch of new people find themselves in a community, those who speak the most, they become created to the minds of the people the most. This was something where in high school, for example, I was very shy and quiet. I realized, oh my God, have I become the wallpaper of the school wall? So there was a silence. And this is why it's like you have to care for existing as a human being in the moment, and it's fun. Believe it or not, it's hard work, but it's like it fills the meaningless void while you're here. So that means it's as if like when this is what the atheist could not see in the theist, and the theist could not see in the atheist, that both were just human beings trying to get through this space-time continuum. That's it. That's all human beings are doing. We don't even have the potential. You think these small brains can hold this big of a universe? The only reason we can know the whole universe or talk about omnipresence is if the intelligence surpasses the brain. If intelligence doesn't surpass the brain is all we got, And this is why I'm saying secular multidimensionality can only be restored if we treat the brain as an antenna. So if fear messes up the signal of the antenna, let's say love, selfless love amplifies the antenna, fear is selfish. Why is fear selfish? Because how do you know you're afraid of something? How does the person know? That means sometimes the person is afraid of the implication of something. It doesn't mean you're afraid of that, There's this incredible animation company in Japan called Studio Ghibli, and they came up with this incredible narrative, this film called Spirited Away. And if you were like the symbolism in that film was incredible, because it was showing how innocence doesn't fear chaos, and chaos learns from how order so innocently exists to itself. That means it's as if like it's same thing in nature. A yogi said this. A yogi said, for those who go to live in the forest, if you suddenly see a wild animal in the forest, and two things: if that animal sees you and knows that you fear it, it will kill you. If the animal sees you and thinks you think you are superior to it, it will kill you. Because then the animal fears. Right? So it's presence of nature and intensity. Right? And the eyes. Because animals, they speak, I would say, more the language of the eyes than the language of, like, it's like when an animal is hungry, it's like, look at the animal staring at me. Its eyes are giving you a message. They're literally transmitting their mind's desire through their eyes. Human beings do that too, of course. But our eyes are portals. That means we can go inside them and we can go outside them. And believe it or not, you have been born with the innate ability to access the inner realm and the outer realm but not to get lost in treating the inner realm as 100% an outer realm. Because when I say inner realm, if the mind is not a non-local numenology, noumenon, as Immanuel Kant says, if the mind cannot be put into a conditional setting to be comprehended, the mind can never be comprehended. The mind is the comprehender. So something beyond calculation, beyond measurement, is coming up with the measurements. And when we forget this, the world of language devours us before the actual reality can restore us. That means for me, it's not just about finding the true self, it is finding the true world. Because the game of selves can be instantly gratified in your inner realms. The person wants to fly in the sky. We don't have the technology for, sound-safe jetpacks, or heat-safe jetpacks. But in my inner realms, do you know how many times I've flown in the sky? I've even become the sky in my inner realms. Because a poet is in some sense how the human being found a way to access the dehumanized without the loss of the humanity. Because metaphysics and philosophy, it is heavy. Unless you have been rendered null to yourself a couple times, it won't be easy to take in an idea that could suggest a completely different worldview. This idea follows the notion of different kinds of civilizations and different kinds of inspirations, externalized inspirations of the efforts of human beings, human groups. In the subtitle, when I say ideological management, I could have also said ideal management. Right? We're managing our ideals, which ultimately set the significance of the moment. If a person makes it their ideal that I only like tall people, or I only like short people, how many people will you pass without never noticing? Or if the person says I only like this, how many that's will you miss out on if you just like this? So ideological management means context setting. So literally human beings, they have to open up the menu, like a techno machine, open up their menu and go into the settings and change the context of their life to infinite. And then they will realize why the temporary plays the game of life. We're not alive to be told we're not. We're alive to realize how we are alive. And not to be afraid of the why questions, because that's what philosophy is about. Oh my God, guys, this was on mute and I was talking, so my apologies. I was saying pretty much if all the professors in the world gathered around and they said students fear the educational system, they fear knowledge, how do we get rid of this fear of knowledge, and they actually wanted to figure it out. Imagine a global professor project. Right? And so these professors gathered around and they came to the conclusion that because of the evolutionary development of the brain, there's a part of the brain, I think it's called the amygdala, where the fight or flight response arises. Okay, fight or flight. So that means all human beings, upon overwhelmment or seeing something unfamiliar, this modality of should I engage, should I use my energy to do something in the moment, or should I use my energy to relocate? So fight or flight means, does the concept make a decision, or is there a decision made on the context? Flight, to run away from something, that means, okay, I don't like this context, the chances of success in this context are low, I'm going to get out of this context, relocate. It's like the same way where if somebody was fighting, let's say like a bunch of people at the same time, they have to relocate, right? Like if you're an archer, okay, and you're in war, best strategy is go up a tree, you know, and hope somebody doesn't throw their sword at the tree. That means that would be like a smart strategy, you know? But I mean, how well can you aim from a tree? Like, that's also a question too, you know? Imagine you're about to aim at the opponent from the tree and you're like, wait a minute, did I just notice a bald eagle's nest right here? That would be next level if the archer on the tree was an advanced communicator, communicated with the bald eagle somehow. The bald eagle held the archer from behind. Let's say a group of bald eagles held the archer from the back of his shirt, and then he was just endlessly from above the battlefield shooting people, gravity helping with his aim, you know. So the professors of all the, let's say, this global effort will be like, okay, so the student can either engage the fear or can run away from the fear. To run away from the fear, if you choose to run away from something, don't run away in making the world aware what you saw there, right? That means if you saw a house that was in flames, you couldn't stop the flames of the house. And if you've ran away, if there's flight, relocate. That means find strength and run away, find strength and come back or something. You know, this doesn't mean fight. This means the fight, the sense of the fight doesn't mean like everyone in their own room punching in invisibility. I mean, this is the notion that what are the options when there is a blockade? You either get rid of the barrier, or you walk where you came from, you walk back and find another location. So you reroute or you enter directly. Now, if fear was entered directly, that means the person was afraid, but then the person's like, I want to know how afraid my fear is of me. That means, let's say the person's afraid of spiders. Okay, the person's like, I want to know now how afraid the spider is of me. And the person's like, let's say drops something beside a spider and sees the spider is afraid of movement. You see, but of course the spider doesn't have the notion of fear as we do, but it is sensitive to its environmental change. I'll tell you something cool about bees. This is something I tested. Bees, if you move your finger at the same speed they are moving in the moment, left and right, it disorients them. They don't know what to make of it. And ultimately the person has to be like, okay, If I've run away, I don't get to see what that whole karmic event was about. But if I at least understand, you know, and I'm not saying in the outer realms, if you're in a dangerous situation, be smart, right? Get out of there. Like, don't have ego or pride if you're like outnumbered or it's unnecessary to lose energy, because people don't realize this. In any sort of violent activity, you're hitting yourself. You can't hit someone without hitting yourself. This is a law in physics. It's like there's a pressure, there's a stress the moment you impact something. So think of somebody punching a wall and there's a reason their hand breaks. You know, so if you hit something, you're hitting, that thing is also hitting you. And I had a teacher in high school named Mr.Within. He shared the story of the mosquito that stopped the train. That means in that nanosecond, for 1 instant, when the mosquito hits the moving train, the mosquito causes a stress, and there has to be a stress from the train on the mosquito. So theoretically, for that tiny moment, the mosquito stopped the train, even though mosquito gets crushed and it just goes for. So that was the idea, you know. It's a cause and effect kind of universe. You can't input violence and not expect violence to be open to you. You know, you can't hold an image and not expect more of that image coming around you. You know. It's not just where your body walks, it's where your mind walks. And for I think it's a very small percentage of people that realize they can choose where their mind walks or how it walks. So the professors would be, we have to create fear simulations. So the fear is kind of abstract until you actually understand it, and then you don't have fear. So the professors would create cyberspace fear simulations. And can you imagine you went into cyberspace and you fought in cyberspace? It's all in cyberspace, but you were alone in a one-man. Imagine like there's this virtual reality video game in the future. It's called One Man Army. Okay, and imagine this video game, you're just this character, and spherically there is an army just running at you, but it runs at you spherically in different angles. So that means, I can't share this as accurately as I'm seeing it in my inner realms, but I'm saying, imagine you're alone, and in that cyberspace simulation, you train yourself, let's say fighting with a sword and shield, okay, with a sword and shield, and let's say the virtual reality was so advanced, the weight, when you picked up the weight of the shield, there was an exact mass proportionate technological replication. So what that means is there would be like, probably this fashion would become animate. Nanotechnology, when it infuses with fashion, there would be a revolution. That means people don't realize nanotechnology will revolutionize everything. It is one of the great technological revolutions that will happen, but it's way ahead of our time. But if you're timeless, it's right here. The person trains in cyberspace fear simulations, and this means that educational system has to change into a battlefield. It's going to be way more exciting, but a battlefield of ideological position, where it's as if all the professors of the world are like, hey, random human beings that have found a way to get into this room, you know, your intelligence is a sword and shield. Questions are swords, answers are shields. Or you could, completely opposite. Answers are swords, I mean, I could see it as both, right? I could see using a question in a more exerted way rather than an inert way. And I didn't finish that Lord of the Ring imagery I wanted to tell you. So instead of Theoden, that Lord of the Rings King Theoden, he goes and he conquers the first army. Then he looks to his left, and all the men of Rohan are like, yeah, we defeated like the bad guys, the first wave of the bad guys. They look to the left. Theoden looks, and the actor does such a brilliant acting here. The actor looks at the giant CGI mammoths heading his way, and he's like, oh. You know, like his mentality is like, literally, it's like a king being like, oh shit, yeah, but it's a king, okay, and the king is like, oh shit, but then he rings the horn, they blow the horns of Rohan, and they're like, they march back into it. That means even if you are weak, you still go forth. Doesn't matter what you are, you go forth, because the mind, if it is multidimensional, it doesn't lose, but the body can. And so the mind has to realize itself beyond language to be able to move in it properly. Something interesting about the word fear is that the word ear is in it. What's up with that? Yeah. So it's as if our fear has to do with the outcome of a narrative, and narratives arise due to our auditory capacity. That means it's like a person playing like a scary video game and then turning off the volume. There was this video game called Doom. And I'm like, yeah, the web developers, they were like, okay, the more freaky sounds we overload the video gamer with, the more they're going to feel like something unique is happening. So the person kind of like, you can turn off the audible dimension, and then the visible dimensions becomes very simple, right? And I feel, believe it or not, it's like, if we comprehend language, if we are if we are victorious in our battle with language, we have, like in the show Shingeki no Kyojin, this would be humanity's first victory against the giant problems. And those mammoths that Theoden was marching towards in this modern context is, in some sense, the giant problems of the realm. They are the universal problems. That means some people, this is how we define a selfish person and a selfless person. A selfish person is trying to solve the problems of themselves only. The selfless person is trying to solve, let's say, there's levels of selflessness, trying to solve the problems of, let's say, their unit. Let's say that's their family, their friends. Then the problems of, let's say, their city, and then let's say their nation, then let's say their planet, their globe, then the galaxy, then the universe. And even in scientific circles, there's talks, there was this man Kardashev, there's something called the Kardashev scale, where it's as if a type 3 civilization, we're currently a type 1 civilization, we're harnessing the power of the earth. Then a type 2 civilization harnesses the power of the sun, and a type 3 civilization is harnessing the power of a galaxy. You know, if I remember correctly, it could have been slightly different, the Kardashev scale, but that's how I remember it. It was a sort of galactic harnessing of power, right? So we harnessed the earth, we harnessed the sun, now the solar system, and beyond galaxy. You know, so that's a scientific. This man was that means if you're a scientist, you should know of him. Because you see, science is not here to just explain the past. It has to also now use some sort of the arbitrary force of imagination to develop the future. Because all theories have arose out of nowhere, like plants that we don't know how they were seeded in the realm. They just appear. So if a person cares for the advanced civilization, you are caring for a global initiative that is even trying to see a universal advancement. So if you want to advance as a universal being, you will have a different karma than if you want to just advance as how you are to yourself, how you are to others, how you are, let's say, to your city, to your nation, and then to the planet, and then to the galactic role of the human being. Where do we go from human activity? We go to its most advanced position, then it has to be a transcendence of some sort, a metamorphosis. So right now, we have to prepare the future generations for a metamorphosis beyond conception, most likely 3,600 years from now. Beyond conceivable object to subject and subject to object relationship. Okay, I need a heavier song. This is, the more I listen to this song, guys, the more I feel I'm just, a spirit in the middle of nowhere. Oh, an awakening to ethereal dreams, There we go, this song. It's gonna be better. There we go. Okay. So... ideological management, let me bring that into the picture. Currently, it's 2020. In 2020, there is a greater than sign towards an object than a subject. But this percentage is changing. There will come probably, let's say I'll just go by tens. In 2030, we will be way more, it will be way more interesting to us how we're being a subject than an object. This will mean reformatting of the central way the educational system has happened, and which means instead of asking the previous educational systems to change, it's as if the strategy is win-win. So the past remains, but all new educational systems must follow. This is after the year 2030 even, I'm considering it, where we are more fascinated by how a subject is being an object and how this equals an unknown activity going on. We are an unknown phenomenon happening here. There's some, we don't know what we are. And every professor couldn't profess, you know, that we don't know. That's it. We don't know. We know to some degree, right? And let's say we are science, in some sense, a miracle of science happened. Science realized the universe. We somehow saw the edge of the observable universe. What do we do with the unobservable? Oh my God, does that mean it's more unknown than known again? So it's really the continental philosophers and the analytical philosophers, this has been their war. Whether society deserves to remain just locked in narratives of knowledge or in be kept mysterious in a sort of dynamism of unknown exploration. That means the educational system, in some sense, is glorifying ignorance. It's glorifying the denial of exploration, and it's rather than realizing there's 8 billion different DNAs, different human beings, different DNA. So how could 8 billion different types of human beings fit into one educational system? It's bizarre. And even when they enter the educational system, they don't care about knowledge. They care about economical survival. And economical survival has made education slowly erode. And teachers are like, why aren't students asking questions? Because you have killed the questions through materialistic centralization. This will change in 2030. In 2030, there will no longer be teachers. There will be performers. There will be a view where it's as if there is no teacher and student anymore. Who has the time for that? You know, it's now every individual human being requires to activate. It's a battlefield. And there are just those who, in this kind of Normandy aftershock, Normandy shell shock, you know, they've just stood up straight and they're like, okay, whatever, we're here now. Let's move it. That means for me, I mean, I have incredible respect for those people who have even fathomed the notion of a past life. But it's as if, okay, you figured out your past life, I don't know, you were God. So the person's like, now what? That means it's as if, where do we want to start the karma of our attention from? Do we want to start it from our past memories, or do we want to start it from now, the here and now? You know, that Eckhart Tolle and Muji and all the New Age community has been like, please guys, please come to the here and now. What the fuck? This would mean the world is becoming more and more, as we continue in the space-time continuum, multidimensional. People are not going to freak out by multidimensionality. They're going to understand it. We're going to navigate through it. And we're going to use every single thing on this giant rock of an island in the galaxy, if space was oceans. We have to use everything. That means egos do not prioritize over efficient technologies activating integratively. That means it's like all those people who wanted to sell fish, you know, imagine in my science fiction novel I write in the future, the government of the future, which is going to be governing multiple parallel universes. Of course, it's science fiction. that government no longer punishes. That government educates. Rehumanizes people. Because viciousness is not human. Because the human is a civil idea. It's something we're using our consciousness to hold. And as the inner realm events pass, where do we go beyond 2030, 2040? In 2040, it will be stabilized. I would say this is where celebration cultures will happen. So 2030, okay, 2020, the known has a greater than sign compared to the unknown. 2030, the unknown, let's say, becomes equal to the known. And let's say 2040, the unknown becomes greater. I mean, I'll go with this model. The unknown becomes greater than the known. 2050, the unknown becomes equal to the unknown. 2060, the unknown is greater than the unknown, which is a sort of ideological revolution. That means this is where it could be possible. I don't know how, but I feel the nature has some surprises for human civilization. It's not all just like, oh my God, why is there so many natural disasters? Why doesn't nature fix things for, you know? Imagine like a solar flare hit the earth, and this solar flare had some sort of unique energy calibration that it healed everyone on the planet instantly, and we're like, what? You know, everybody was shocked, like, what just happened, you know? And we realized that was, instead of a natural disaster, a nature's gift. You know, light is a gift of nature, really. And so is sound. And so is just ultimately the intelligence that is using the different channels of senses. That means the concept of channeling to me makes more sense if it's a sort of sensory channel that is prioritizing. That means, let's say somebody comes and says, yo, I saw a being in another dimension the other day, right? And the friend of that person's like, it's like, did you hear anything? And the person's like, yeah, but I didn't hear the creature, the interdimensional being, when I saw it. So it's as if a sense can predominate. I shouldn't say predominate, but can be more dominant in the inner realms than the other senses. For example, I have focused more to, like, I just know, like, it depends on our senses. Like, you know, it's as if you're an instrument. How many times have you strummed the strings of this instrument that you are, this advanced instrument? And someone Valerie in the chat section says law of attraction. Something I gotta say about law of attraction. That the law of attraction, you attract a lot of law of attraction books. Because there is no law of attraction. Attraction is subjective. Subjective reality is evocational. So it can't be a law if you are creating it. But if law of attraction means placebo effect, sure. Call that a sort of law of thought, a sort of angle. But for me, it's not about that, because I noticed the law of attraction community, they're doing something hilarious. It's as if they're making people enter heaven like robots. Because this nature is like weather. Law of attraction is like, have one mindset and you'll eventually see that mindset. It's like, that's ridiculous. It's like weather. You can't dress the same every day. You can't have one narrative. I think the mystical approach is way more healthier, where you keep the moment unknown, and the moment as it happens, it reveals to you its known variables, and then in accordance. Now, if you say someone in the law of attraction community is talking about in your inner realm, see something, that means go sit somewhere, close your eyes until you see something so real. That means, let's say if you want to be a pilot, you sit down, you close your eyes, and you envision yourself steering inside a plane, what the cabin would look like, what your hand moving and touching the buttons and the texture would look like, and then you open your eyes and live towards being a pilot. Sure, in that way, law of attraction, I mean, I wouldn't give it that name. Right? The law of attraction is as if, like, who doesn't like the word attraction? You know, even the word attraction makes you attracted. You know, it's like, I don't know why I'm so attracted to the word attraction, you know? So ultimately what I'm saying is that you're not a machine, but you can treat yourself as one, of course. But it's unnecessary. Be the winds of evolution. Be the intelligence in the room. The unknown intelligence in the known room. There's nothing wrong with this idea. It's not superstitious. It's not too metaphysical. It's just that we don't know how we know that we don't know. And that's remarkable. And rather than brushed aside, you know, something I saw that I was like, there was, I was watching this debate between atheists and theists, and for me, I was like, oh my God, like I had so much respect for the speakers from the atheistic lens, but what I didn't have respect for was how they were treating another human being regardless of their ideology, right? Like, it is okay to put on a show, but at the expense of your civilization, maybe there are better routes, you know? It's like you don't fight fire with fire, because then the whole world burns. Somebody, usually the more intelligent person gives in, because the intelligent person's like, what am I doing engaged in this reality simulation? The intelligence can move past itself. In so many shows, like at least in Japanese narratives, there's like the main character constantly, the whole theme is surpass your limits, and the characters are like, we don't know what to do though, and the leader's like, surpass your limits, that's a limit. Some have said fear is a cage also. So it could be that we are caged in language because we fear the unknown. And to embrace a multidimensional civilization means we require to embrace a multidimensional language. And guess what? Language is multidimensional. Go look at the dictionary. Words have multiple meanings. Words can be a noun and a verb. Right? Words can be used in so many different sentences, even when it comes to speech and tone, even beyond the semantics. Like, it becomes something where how we use language is so incredible when we zoom into it that it's kind of surreal how there is reality. So reality is surreal. What do we do about that? So 2060, the educational system would be as if there are just heroes of the unknown, heroic feats. That means if there was a person who was like a researcher researching, I don't know, why baboons giggle, or somehow if they do or not, I don't know. I mean, that may seem insignificant, but any insignificant finding leading more to making us discover more about the context is useful. That means imagine people going on YouTube and communicating not with the judgment of what does the world want to hear, but just like, okay, where's the edge of human sight? And is it okay to wonder about this? And it has to be, because if it isn't, we are done. There is nothing to do when you're nothing. In 2060, there will be champions of thought and those who cared enough to serve the mind of the civilization. And there will be champions of the body. That means in the future, let's say there was like people, of course it is, let's say it's way in the future, but even though I was giving it 10-year frameworks, it could totally be given 20-year frameworks, 30-year frameworks, who knows. So it could be way in the future, what I'm saying. But it's going to be a point where the only certification, first of all, the idea of certificates, it's like, what is it? It's like stop worshipping paper, you know? The idea is exploration value to the collective archive, into the context of the collective archive. So that means we're treating human knowledge as a headquarter of the known universe, and everybody enters this headquarters, like this tribe, this global tribe of knowledge, and we're like, okay, some people, they are in the global tribe to preserve the knowledge, some people are there to translate the unknown to the known, they're the intermediary, and there are those who are in the unknown, mavericks. Right? That means you can zoom in on like an intoxicated rapper in an interview and see such complex frameworks of attitude projection. So that means everything that is unknown has an incredible value to those who realize it doesn't have to just be accessed in a limited known way, in just one known way. That these are signs that the species is becoming multidimensional. Its freedom is the biggest sign, and it's charity. That means how much you're like, all right, at the end of the day, regardless of what everybody believes or disbelieves, we're just, you know, human beings breathing. You know, we're just creatures just walking on this earth. And imagine all the animals, all the other species became conscious, and all of them collectively could ask us one question. They'd be like, why are you guys wearing clothes? Why are we wearing clothing? Right? Like, why do you guys have the concept of fashion? Like, I think when aliens see that, they're going to be like, this doesn't make sense. They're entertaining a completely physical realm, but their fashion sense is based on their inner emotional choice. So you see, for animals, they're like, we are like aliens, where clothing is like alien technology to them. And people are like, why isn't the human being growing in size? Could this be a clue? Could clothing be a reason? That means maybe it should be healthy for everybody to wear clothing that's way more larger than their size. All these cool people, you see it in Instagram, I'm like, this is kind of like torture for these people, right? It's like clothing is becoming like a bag that's choking the person. I'm like, what is this? You know? And the issue of it is like, it's not intelligent clothing. Intelligent clothing would probably be like the ancient Greeks, would be like robes. I wouldn't mind a civilization like that, because it's like the body, it breathes that way even. Or even having like cloaks back. How cool would that be? Everybody is wearing a cloak. In the future, somebody sponsors their advertisement on your cloak, you know. It's like, hey man, how much for me to, you know, share my website link on your cloak? You know? And the person's like, man, this is just clothing. Here, have it. It's like that's the worst thing. That would be honestly a symptom of inner extinction if we become cloth worshippers, you know? It's like, stop worshipping cloth, people. You know, it's just cloth, you know? I think the best clothing in the future would just be energy force fields that are light. So literally people are just covered in light. and it's an energy intelligent force field where inside the clothing is like an Iron Man suit technically, but it's just energy. So technically it's like what better what better a material to use to build clothing as light. So in the future, imagine this is like the evolution of the fashion industry, let's say in the year 2500, where they're selling light as clothing. That's ancient story and fable of the king within the invisible clothing, where there's this king that's like foolish, and there's these salesmen who come and keep making next level clothing for these for this king, and the king's like, I don't know about this, and they're like, king, you deserve better clothing. Look at how smart they are. They're giving the guy a clothing, and the king a clothing, and they're like, you deserve something better than this. And then they build something else and give it to the king again. And then at the end, they're like, this king is blind. This is a blind king. Right? And so the king has to go in public, and they're like, king, let us create for you the smoothest, the most incredible clothing. And for like 30 minutes in front of this king, they're working with like in the clothing machine, and the clothing machine has no cloth in it. It's invisible. It has no content. It's just a machine working like with nothing in it, right? But they're acting as if they're building an invisible clothing. And then they bring this invisible clothing as if they've held it in their hand to this king, and they're like, king, are you ready? We have created the ultimate clothing for you. We have created invisible clothes for you. And the king is like, invisible clothes? Holy shit, it sounds advanced. It's like, let me show off, And so this naked king walks in the kingdom, and people are like, yo, is this the king? What is going on? It's all geometry. Everything is geometry, just happening. Oh yeah, the emperor's new clothes. Thank you, Valerie in the chat section helped out with this. Yeah, the emperor's new clothes. Yeah. There's different emperors, guys. There has been people like, even though history frowns upon this man, but Napoleon. And for example, when he went to take back the palace from one of the Louis kings that was afraid eating pastries like in his palace. So Napoleon goes to the Frenchmen, the French people are on his side, the French army is on his side, and Napoleon is going back to the palace. Now this is a very crucial moment. Why? Because the palace guards are Frenchmen. The palace guards are Frenchmen. And Napoleon finds his a moment where his men are pointing guns at other Frenchmen who are defending the palace. And the Frenchmen, they don't care what king, like they don't care what happens in the nation. They are such honorable soldiers that they are like, we are palace guards. Like they have embodied that spirit. So it doesn't matter if it's a weak king, if it's a strong king or something. They have this honor, right? But something happens. Something happens that the palace guards don't expect that changes them. And this artist drew, named Jacques, that's all I remember from the artist's name, that he drew this painting of this moment. And so what happens is Napoleon, right? And it's like he goes there and he has this military jacket on, and he just raises his hand and slowly lowers it, and all his men they bring down their weapons, right? So his men stop pointing guns at the French guards who are pointing guns. Then he slowly walks in front of all the French guards, and all the French guards are aiming at Napoleon with their weapons. So imagine a moment where he's seeing endless rifles pointed at him, not endless, but a bunch of rifles pointed at him. Endless rifle. It's like, it's not the Matrix yet, but anyways, so what happens is Napoleon goes there, and imagine it's snowing, and Napoleon opens his jacket to show his vulnerability, and he shouts, look at his inner arms, he shouts, who dares shoot their emperor? Who dares shoot their emperor? Who dares shoot their emperor? He just shouts this. He shouts this as if he has understood the value, as if he didn't go and kill the Frenchmen. the French palace guards. He asked them a question, you know, technically with his statement, you know. And then for a second, the palace guards were like, okay, this emperor, this is more of an emperor to lead the nation than the, you know, the one of the Louis that was afraid. There were human beings like that alive on the planet, like Napoleon, and then there are people nowadays, they're like stressed, depressed, they glorify their inefficiencies, not realizing their attention is keeping it there. If we can somehow surpass fear, we surpass mis-ideological management. So I feel there is no other way for salvation of all cultural programs on this earth unless we step out of language and we build the new earth. As if the inner earth didn't need to hide anymore. The new earth arose, just like for example, again, the archetype of the snake, where the skin of the snake leaves, or in some sense fear has made us believe in efficiency before efficiency. If this algorithm can be reversed, the human being will be like, whoa, so I'm an energetic being in an energetic universe, and it is so vast, and so there's so many ways, endless ways to look at it. So what is the meaning of life? And this is where you realize you have entered the most sophisticated office in this universal sector to start your great work as a living being. It is no longer the story of the human empire or human empires of thought. It's just, are we as a species street smart enough to advance civilization, or too emotionally weak to change our eyes? Channel 3 in the chat section says, are you talking about advancing to a type 1 civilization? Oh, no. I referred to the Kardashev scale in an example earlier, but I have my own classification of civilization structure. As a person, channel 3 in the chat section, you're asking. So the way I see civilization, like it's a giant part of my work, I call it civilization 2.0. And I have seen, if there are certain great transformations in civilization 1.0, I consider it. And then the Mr. Within civilization 2.0 model, that's a strategy to bypass extinction indefinitely. And I feel it's a workable strategy, but there is measures, there's some decisions. Like, we're in such a multidimensional system and so many human behavior being input into the world, right, that it's completely different. Because even if we can harness the power of a planet, do we have the morality to maintain it? If we harness the power of a sun, how do we know we won't burn ourselves into oblivion due to, let's say, a technological desire, right? So there's so many situations that the human civilization has to work for, and if we're still caught in our own life stories, what about the life of our world? Are we here to just see ourselves, or are we here to see how the self is alongside a realm occurring? Because once you become an advanced communicator and you realize the most advanced communication is the advanced communication of the universal sector, you realize what the universe is doing is the most advanced communication. You were inside the most advanced communication, communicating in a linguistic cage, imagine, right? And I'm not saying you, I'm just speaking here, but I'm saying like, so from this linguistic cage, the personal identity, the attention lifts beyond, and you know what it becomes like? It becomes like, like if there was a pen in front of you and somebody told to pick it up, how easily it is a person picks up a pen from a table. So anyone who's listening to me right now, if there's an object in front of you, just pick it up. Just pick it up and hold it in the air. And if you've done that, you know, you didn't plan for years. You didn't theorize, philosophize about the future. You instantly did it. And what is preventing us from instantly activating our attention through a complete different lens of freedom of thought? For me, this is what I feel like the whole Mr. Within archetype is here to, is a cyberspace avatar to resurface the legend of the castles in the sky. I'm that guy in history who cares for this legend. I think probably in a ridiculous way. I've had too many clues in my inner realms building up to this idea that I just know if I'm still around in the future, it's probably I'm going to go around the world and talk about this. And let's say robots take all our jobs, art will be the future. So in the future, art will technically lead to political decision making would just be art. That means no longer we're saying is the policy good or bad, we're like, is it beautiful or is it not, and in what ways is it beautiful? And this beauty doesn't mean kind of through a lens, through a soft structure or a hard structure. It means a beauty that is fascinating, right? Because there was this family called the Medici family in during the Renaissance, and they were like these rich bankers, and of course their motives were questionable, but they did something genius. And what they did was they started making civilization beautiful. They started investing, even though you could say they were like, you know, playing chess, but they at the same time understood the beauty should not be forgotten. It is one of those divine inner restoration projects that could never be stopped, that should never be stopped. And so the Medici family came and made civilization beautiful because they're like, people are alive once, why not? Why not they experience an advanced civilization, an incredible civilization, right? That means it's as if you have the power to write history, you better have good handwriting. Beautiful handwriting, because the future deserves that. And I feel even when it comes to, and you know, this may be an odd tangent, but when it comes to deciding if children more children should emerge on this planet, it's as if we gotta make sure we're not creating, and like it's as if we're creating an inefficient future for human beings that we're hoping to be efficient. So we're making life harder for human beings, and then trying to have kids and saying have hope and follow your dreams and be ambitious, right? So it's literally, it's like an extension of inefficiency. It's hard to watch. So there has to be some sort of supernova global story, the story of the world's reform. So guys, I'm going to go into a quote tunnel of fear, and then the void will continue the talk. Okay, let's see what history has to say about fear. It's like we're like, oh my God. We asked if history, what is fear, and history said, I am fear. You know. Fear. So guys, a co-tunnel is pretty much I'm trying to see how the eyes of human beings have opened to the world. Okay. And anyone who knows a remedy to, I don't know, someone who's a smoker, like a natural remedy, herbal remedy, feel free to share that in the comment section. But the journey in the trenches of civilization continues. And so there's bigger problems than stuff. Ananin says, this used to be a much shorter and more... oh my god, this is... sorry. This is... Ananin says, people living deeply have no fear of death. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, when a resolute young fellow steps up to the great bully, the world, and takes him boldly by the beard, he's often surprised to find it comes off in his hand, and that it was only tied on to scare away the timid adventurers. Bertrand Russell, fear is the main source of superstition, and one of the main sources of cruelty. To conquer fear is the beginning of wisdom. I want to also point out, Freud also wrote a book called The Future of an Illusion, if I remember correctly, and in it there was an idea, evidently, that as long as human beings fear death, they want to hold on to the authority figure. That means that as long as it's like until you haven't realized you're the pilot, you want to be piloted. You know how phones have an airplane mode? For yogis, their phones have a God mode, a samadhi mode. Carl Augustus Menninger says fears are educated into us and can, if we wish, be educated out. James F. Byrnes says too many people are thinking of security instead of opportunity. They seem to be more afraid of life than death. Wow. This quote is what civilization needs to hear. We are afraid of where was I? Yeah, guys, just pretty much people are afraid of life more than death, and that's hilarious. Rudyard, I'll keep going with the quote down. Rudyard Kipling. Of all the liars in the world, sometimes the worst are our own fears. Incredible. James Stevens says curiosity will conquer fear even more than bravery will. I will tell you, sure, curiosity will conquer fear. Fascination will have already conquered fear. That means the concept of fear is like less important. It's like, oh my God, did fascination step into the room? Let me go talk to fascination. And fear is like, oh, you know, I was talking to this person. Herman Melville, ignorance is the parent of fear. This is from Anonymous, but it's a quote that's on the site. I think it's probably the person who wrote the site. But he says fear is false evidence appearing real. Not always. I mean, it's like when you see like a lion growling at you like a meter away beside you, you know, and let's say you're in the future and you have teleportation tech, you're like, okay, maybe I should, you know, use this technology. But it can be in many cases that it's what is a fear is a mask for a truth, that the moment we take off the mask, we see we feared who we would be if we engaged the moment. But if you don't fear your future, then the present and past are at peace, as if their leader is certain. Not certain, but standing strong. That means the greater our vision of our future, the more the past and present will feel liberated. William Allen White says, I am not afraid of tomorrow, for I have seen yesterday and I love today. Yeah, you saw yesterday, so you can't fear the past because it's done. Like those simulations closed a while ago, you know. And so the today is like the present is where life is accessible. So this is why when the person loves their moment, they automatically love life. It doesn't matter in what way it moves. It doesn't matter if it's like this is where I agree with the Jainists. In the Isa Upanishad, it says, who sees all beings in his own self, and his own self in all being loses all fear. There you go. This quote is Seneca says we are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. I don't know who found these quotes, but there's angels in philosophy too, guys. They're called scribes. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, do the thing you fear and the death of fear is certain. Milton says, where no hope is left no fear. And this kind of makes sense, I guess, what Milton is saying, where no hope is left no fear. Because when you have no hope, it's an ultimate situation. It's an absolute mentality where the person has entered the bottom of a system, so the only way they can go is to go up, and they experience their journey up the mountain of their realm. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't have hope. Hope is strategy, probability. It's just probabilities of different ways the world can happen, and it's the better probability usually, or the one that's emotionally sought after. George R.R. Martin says, laughter is poison to fear. There is a Japanese proverb that says, fear is only as deep as the mind allows. Wow. So don't allow your mind deep fear, you know. It's like, why? It's like the mind's like, I've been getting you by, human being. Why are you afraid? You know? The mind's like, oh man, the human being doesn't trust the universe yet. What have I been doing this whole time? And that's the biggest thing. This is the best measure of spiritual, in quotations, spiritual progress. And its best measure is freedom. And liberated ability. It's like seeing 8 billion minds fly into their most advanced possibility. How cool would that be? Dale Carnegie says, instead of worrying about what people say of you, why not spend time trying to accomplish something they will admire? Henry Ford says, one of the greatest discoveries a man makes, one of his great surprises, is to find he can do what he was afraid he couldn't do. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Helen Keller, avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. The fearful are caught as often as the bold. Eric Hoffer, you can discover what your enemy fears most by observing the means he uses to frighten you. Wow, that's definitely comes in handy. Benjamin Disraeli says, fear makes us feel our humanity. Peter McWilliams says, to overcome fear, here's all you have to do. Realize the fear is there and do the action you fear anyway. Marcus Aurelius says, if you're distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. This is also, guys, what I mean that in the inner realms is evocational. Do you know that means anybody alone to themselves can be anything? You know what I mean? So it's instant evocation, but to really care for the deeper mysteries of the realm, to find the true self or the truest self, not the robotic self. The mechanistic self is technically a repeating pattern. But this repeating pattern has sought innovation, has sought novelty. That means systems are made to break. And in their breaking, new systems emerge. And why do new systems emerge? Because we are in a caterpillar universe, and it will become a butterfly universe. And when it becomes a butterfly universe, the caterpillar universe is our memory. So right now, we are being the memory in the mind of a future civilization that is already there. That means the present is the portal to the past and the future. Those who understand this, they laugh at language that could never touch them. As Aristotle says, it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. What is an idea? It is language. Language, it's accepted language. By an unknown moving force. Arnold Glazo says, fear is the lengthened shadow of ignorance. Ananin says, life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. This is so true. That means this is where if a person distrusts their outer realms, they won't have the courage to express themselves in their inner realms. That means it's like feeling impure in the moment and then not expressing it all as a sort of pure strategy, let's say. Ralph Waldo Emerson says, fear defeats more people than any other one thing in the world. Aristotle says fear is pain arising from the anticipation of evil. Dale Carnegie says, do the thing you fear to do and keep on doing it. That is the quickest and surest way ever yet discovered to conquer fear. That means it's hilarious. How do you conquer fear? Just like how do you conquer matter? With antimatter, anti-fear. You gotta find an anti-fear mindset. You gotta find the kryptonite of the kryptonite. Rosa Parks says, I have learned over the years that when one's mind is made up, this diminishes fear. Knowing what must be done does away with fear. Robert Louis Stevenson, keep your fears to yourself, but share your courage with others. Yeah, and culture right now, modern culture is using fear to bond. This way friendships are cruel. We are masked in a decent civilization, but underneath it we were animals in jungles that moved to the concrete jungle, and now it has to be so much greater. A greater power source is required for conscious choice. That means the person has to more and more be like, what's more important? To just be a body oblivious to anything else outside of its perception, or to be the focal point of the most advanced possibility the intelligence allows. That means after some point the person has to be like, I don't care what the world says. I'm the user of this instrument. The instrument is in my hand. So people can't tell me how to play the instrument when it's my instrument. You know, that means it's like a guitar player and somebody telling them don't play that, right? And the person's like, okay man, but this is my guitar, relax. You know, and it's not wrong. The person can listen. The person could be like, why do you tell me not to play this? And let's say the person has an ignorant reason, you don't listen. But if they have a conscious reason, they're like, because you could play this way and da-da-da-da-da, you'd be like, oh, okay, thanks. But then you still play your own way, but you incorporate that structure somehow through an innovative lens again into your psyche. So what it means is like, you see, there is no, Pablo Picasso, he said, God, what was the quote? He said, great artists create, oh my God, hold on. Pablo Picasso has this quote. He says, good artists borrow, great artists steal. Now let me tell you, greater artists geometrically, by using time, go forward from the idea. That means you don't touch, you keep the origin and you go to the additional dimension. So that means the greatest artists, they are not, they preserve the value of what they use to build. It literally means an invention cares for its all the where its resources came from that built it, you know. So we honor the past and we're like, rest now. We look at the present and we're like, wake up. We look at the future and we're like, time to design. And the species goes into the greatest problem to solve, our own humanity's future. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna end it here, the quote tunnel and everything. But I'll share one last quote from Henry from Aeschylus. He says, there are times when fear is good. It must keep its watchful place at the heart's control. Okay, let's find a better one. Okay, perfect quote to end off with, end the quote tunnel. Plato says we can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light. We are afraid of our greater potential, pretty much. That's a tragedy. That's a WTF moment in history. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening and namaste. I'll be on Discord for a little bit. Blessings.